The word insight, what does it mean to you? For me, it can stir a few emotions in my professional life. Certainly, it seems to be a word that comes up more and more often to help us position our own conversation, our own data, perhaps just our own mundane information that we package as insight. So I think it can become misused. And it's when I stumble upon these misused words that I like to find experts who can help us demystify. There's another word for you. Debundle and unpack what can become an overused word, but ultimately underneath all that, there is something very, very important about it. We often use the phrase share insights, not information. I think there's a distinct difference in those two things, which I hope today's guest might agree with me. And if not, it's going to make for a great conversation, I'm sure. So what is an insight anyway? How does it differ from information? And how can you put them to good use for your own positioning, your own branding, and ultimately, I guess, your own sales and revenue success? So we're going to have a real good chat around all that. And I'm delighted that my guest today has written the book on insights. Any insights yet? With a question mark. Written by brand expert Chris Kocek, who I'm delighted joins us from the beautiful city of Austin, Texas, all the way over in the States. Chris, thank you for taking time out of your morning to be with us today. Give us an overview of your professional life. How did you get to doing what you do? Who do you help? And tell us about that.
Yeah, so thanks for the warm introduction. I'm the CEO of Gallant Branding. We're a strategy and design studio, like you said, in Austin, Texas. Before that, I got started at BBDO New York, which is a great big advertising agency in New York and all around the world. They've got offices all around the world. And I started out as a strategic planner there and worked on brands like Lowe's, Hyatt Hotels, Lowe's Home Improvement, I should say. There is Lowe's Theater. But Lowe's Home Improvement, Hyatt Hotels, and a number of other brands. And then I got recruited out to GSD&M in Austin, where I was asked to work on Ace Hardware, John Deere, AARP, a number of, again, big brands, mix of for-profit and nonprofit brands. And that's how I got started. And then at some point when my daughter was about 1 year old, I said, I'm gonna start something new, and I started Gallant Branding.
Wow, what a brave time to start something new, Chris. When you've got a 1 year old, what a great time to do. Similar to my own story when I got made redundant while my wife was pregnant and I had a 2 year old. That was my kick up the backside to start working for myself. But it sounds like you took the leap of faith without being pushed. So kudos to you there. I think, it sounds like, Chris, you've got a lot of experience in B2B, business to business, business to consumer, as you said, profit and not for profit. Has the marketing environment changed, I guess, in your career? What's the biggest changes you've seen across your breadth of experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I think, you read about it all the time about big agencies, big advertising is dead. The big idea, even some people will say, is now dead because of social media, coming in, and it's a bunch of little ideas that are kind of connecting between themselves. So coming from a big agency or a couple of big agencies, I worked on big brands, focusing on big ideas, and that's very different than where we are now. With Gallant Branding, we're one of those smaller, nimble agencies that says, okay, what's the problem? What's the challenge? And advertising is not necessarily always the solution, right? What we do is we go deep into the business, and we may even make recommendations that impact their research and development or their innovation streams.
Brilliant. And I think you're right. It's in the day of digital and social, there's the risk that just because brands can use platforms like that and communicate quicker doesn't necessarily mean they should, or they don't necessarily know how to. And I guess you've probably seen it countless times. They fall into what we say, the sea of sameness. Everyone's posting, but everyone's posting the same, and they're just posting stuff. And I think, Chris, that's where this word insight starts to creep in. It's like, well, you must start sharing insights. Don't just share the same as everyone else, share insight. And I guess it might be a good start point for us before we dive into what an insight is. I found it interesting in your book that you start by telling us what it isn't. So if you don't mind kicking us off there, what is not an insight where we might be
Yeah.
tripping ourselves up?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I'm a word nerd, self-admitted word nerd, and I love dissecting words and trying to understand what does it really mean or what are the shades of meaning. And as I started down this road trying to understand what an insight is, first of all, I interviewed a whole bunch of people and I asked them, hey, what's your definition of an insight? And I got a lot of different answers, and that led me to this place of, okay, well, let's start with what it isn't, right? Because a lot of people will say certain things. And so it's not a data point. It's not just an observation. It's not this might sound tricky, but it's not just a human truth or a low-hanging or tired and worn human truth like people are time poor. That's a human truth. It's true. We all know it. We all feel it, but that's not an insight. That's not going to rise to the level of an insight. And so, but the thing is, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I've got an insight," right? And then they say, 75% of consumers do X, Y, Z. Say, well, that's not really an insight. That's a data point. And I don't want to, mince words with people. I don't do that in meetings. If somebody says they have an insight, I don't correct them on their language. But a data point is a data point, and it could be the beginning of an insight, like the breadcrumb trail that leads you toward an insight, but a data point in and of itself isn't an insight.
Okay, so when you say an observation isn't an insight, does it contribute to what an insight might be, as well as a data point, as well as a basic human truth? Are they individually? They're not, but if you somehow combine them, they become.
Absolutely, yeah. When they all come together, I like to use the metaphor of a constellation. So, in the book, I talk about my definition of an insight is it's like a constellation. It's all of these things coming together. When you look up at the night sky, you'll see these big, bright stars. Each individual star is not going to necessarily lead you where you need to go, but like the navigators of old or the sailors of old, you look up and you find a constellation. You say, okay, now I know where I need to go. Some people will say, okay, well, the North Star will lead you where you need to go. But the sailors of old or the navigators of old, they used constellations as their guideposts, right? To help them navigate. And so a constellation metaphor is, to me, quite apt because it gives you direction, but it's the sum of all of those things coming together. So, I mean, I have some examples that might be
Please.
helpful.
Yeah, please.
So one example that I love is if you're familiar with Netflix,
Oh, yeah.
right? So there were a lot of individual stars in the sky leading up to the creation of Netflix, but only the founders of Netflix kind of brought them all together, acted upon them, did something, took that risk. But one of the stars in the sky with Blockbuster was kind of the last major chain. I'm not sure about in the UK what the
Yeah, we had. Well, yeah, we had a Blockbuster. Right,
yeah.
absolutely.
And so they were around, and there were some major pain points that customers experienced, right? Like late fees,
Hmm.
and even just going there
Just
to
never having the video behind the thing.
That's
Yeah.
right. So those kinds of things, those were pain points that everybody felt and knew. You could call those human truths or customer pain points. But some other things had to happen for Netflix to exist. One of the things was like a tech shift from VHS to DVDs. If DVDs didn't exist, I don't think Netflix would have existed initially because they were so light and so thin. And the founders said, okay, we have a totally different distribution system. Instead of a brick and mortar store, we're going to push these through the postal service, right? And it's going to be super light and cheap. And we're also going to switch from a rental situation where you're renting individual things to a subscription-based model. That was a big shift and a pretty big um, aha moment for them was that we can completely change the distribution method, eliminate the late fees that people hate anyway. You could have one DVD for a whole month if you want to. We don't care, but of course they do care because they need you to keep getting new things so that the platform and the subscription is worth it and stays sticky. But the other big thing is understanding that people, their browsing habits were changing. This was in the late 90s, right? But that people were becoming more comfortable with looking at things online, catalogs and things like that, and realizing that movies are really just a catalogable thing like books, the summary of a book, the summary of a movie. You look at the back of the videotape back in the day, you say, no, I don't want to watch that. That summary doesn't sound interesting enough to me. Right. And so they figured out a lot of those things. Each one of those things, if I had asked you 20 some odd years ago, hey, is this a pain point? What about this? Do you notice that things are changing from VHS to DVD? You'd say, just like me, yep, I see all those things. But it's the person or people who bring it all together into one constellation and say, I think there's a new business model here. And that's the insight.
Wow. So an insight in that example is a hugely powerful piece of kit that not everyone is going to be able to see. I guess not everyone can create the next Netflix. It's just not possible. There'll be micro moments where that can be seen, I guess. And back to your initial response where you said an insight is not an observation, it's not a data point, it's not just a basic human truth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think boardrooms, leadership, have they got lazy by just referencing a data point as an insight? Does it make them sound clever? Or is it just by accident? Have we just overused the word a little bit?
I think we've overused the word quite a bit. And everybody feels like they have to bring an insight to the meeting. I mean, I think you're lucky if you get a handful of insights in your life because
Right. Wow.
they are big things and they're complicated structures and they lead sometimes or a lot of times to simple solutions, right? Like a disruptive category or a category disrupting insight. Um, I don't think it's laziness. I actually think it's a combination of it's just a word that's been overused and not particularly properly defined. And then secondly, I just think that there's a lot of pressure in boardrooms. I think that quarterly earnings reports make people just reach for the lowest hanging fruit and say, yeah, that's it. Go with that. That's our insight. And you're kind of like, well, everybody has that observation or everybody knows this thing about people. What's new? What's different? How can we reframe this truth to be something that's, like nothing anybody's ever heard or seen before?
What I'm hearing there, Chris, and I might be wrong, please correct me if I'm, is people are mistaking opinion for insight. They almost look at the point, say, yes, I think that, go with that. I've got a good opinion about what the data is telling me, therefore I'll transform that into what I think is an insight, when to your definition, it's not whatsoever.
I think you have to have a point of view when you
Mm.
come to the table if you're going to sell somebody something, but I think that it's more than just your opinion. It does have to be backed up by some sort of data, even if that data is qualitative in nature and it's just a handful of observations. One of the examples I give in the book is with Lowe's Home Improvement or any home improvement place, that the there's this thing that happens if you've ever done a home improvement project called project creep. You keep going
Too
back to the
often.
store.
Yeah.
You're just trying to do a simple thing and you find yourself going back and forth to the store, 5, 6 times. And then when you go there, you don't always have the language that you need, right? So you say, I need this thingamabobber. I'm looking for this whatchamacallit. I don't know what you guys might say in the UK, but
Similar.
it's usually some made up word,
Thingamajig, that's what
a
we have. Yeah.
thingamajig, a thingamajig. And so there's all these things that are happening in the home improvement category. And one of the things that I kind of came up with looking at all of this stuff in my various experiences working in hardware and home improvement was, look, if every project kind of takes 1,000 words to describe when you get to the store, you say, look, this is my problem, blah, 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 blah. And if so many people have, mobile phones on them and they're taking pictures of the space, why not create a portal that allows you to upload your home improvement project question in the form of a picture, to these places? And then you could actually get immediate advice, right? And those people, the home improvement experts, which can then be distributed, they don't need to be in a single brick and mortar location. You can get experts who are really going to weigh in on this stuff and say, okay, I see what's going on there. You need this tool, and this thing, and it's called this. And by the way, you can get them in these aisles, or we'll just have it, packed up for you so you can just pick it up curbside or even have it delivered to your house. So this idea of like a portal that allows people to start their home improvement projects that way, it's a fundamentally different starting place than let me get in my car, drive to the place, or let me watch some YouTube videos, which are never going to have the exact toilet make or model that I'm dealing with,
Mm,
or the limitations of the physical space. It's just not going to be like that. And so, that's an example of stringing together a bunch of different things that you notice in the world and saying, hey, is there a different way that we could do this?
mm. I think that's and I scribbled down in my notes here while you were talking previously. It's always like where you say, is there another way we can do this? I've just put, so what? Question mark. It's like we have the data, so what? We have the
Mhm.
observations, so what? Is that a good way to start building out, I guess, information and data points into something more applicable that can be to what I
Yeah.
guess you would say is an insight?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to, one of the techniques I talk about in the book is keep asking why.
Mm,
If somebody says, okay, this is the way that we do things, or this is the way the consumer does things, this is their journey, this is their process. Why? Why is it like that? Why don't they do XYZ things? Or to your point, you can say, so what? Both of these questions, whether you say so what or you keep asking why in a briefing, they can be a bit combative. And so that's
mm,
the delicate nature of working with insights or trying to get to an insight is you are going to be challenging the status quo. You're going to be challenging leaders who say, well, this is the way we've always done it. Don't make me look stupid. I'm the CEO, or I'm the president, or I've been doing this for 20 years. Well, that can be sometimes kind of the problem. You need somebody to come in with a fresh set of eyes, and I like to say, play the role of marriage counselor between your brand and the consumer and try to figure out a new, better, faster, more original, perhaps cheaper way of doing things.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting you say about how leadership can sometimes prevent things happening. We do a lot of work in the B2B space, but more so in the lubricant industry. And that very thing happens. It's different in our industry or here. It doesn't work like that in our industry, or our customers are uniquely different. It's like, well, how do you know? When did you last ask them?
Hmm.
Well, we haven't
Hmm.
asked them. It's like, well, you're just assuming then, right? So
Hmm.
so as part of the work that we're doing currently is one of the largest buyer sort of research programs globally, to try and really dig into how buyers are buying there. And in my mind, we're collecting insights there, but from what we're talking about here, we're collecting data points.
Yeah. Yeah. You're collecting data points and you're trying to reframe things.
Mm,
That's a huge thing because if you just keep going with the same old direction as you've always been going, then it's not going to be original. But when you reframe something, when you ask a fundamentally different question, you'll probably get to a fundamentally different place.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting. That so what question I'm just thinking in my mind here. It's like, early data suggests that 80% of buyers in the lubricant market have
Hmm.
completed their independent research before connecting to a seller. Okay, that's a data point, but now I can say, so what?
Hmm.
And I can start to flesh that out and move that forwards to, as you say, reframe, which I think is something we often forget to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, reframing is hard and it's also different from rephrasing. So
Mm,
rephrasing, you're just going to take the same words and you're going to find synonyms. But reframing is looking at it from a completely different vantage point. So again, one of the examples I give in the book is around the area of lawn mowers or tractors, lawn tractor, lawn mower type things, and where a lot of times people would say, "Look, how can we speed up the process of lawn mowing?" Right? Like we want to get this chore done and out of the way so that we can get back to whatever we want to do on a Sunday afternoon. But that's starting from a place that you assume that speed is the only ultimate goal. What if, and this again is one of the techniques is asking what if you could make a lawn mowing robot that could do it so that no human has to sit in the chair and it's more like a Roomba, like one of these automatic vacuum cleaners. But instead of sucking things up, it's mowing things down. And there is actually a company, Husqvarna, has created that very thing, you know?
wow. Yeah,
So
to reframe the same problem. Yeah, what if? Yeah, it makes you think differently, right?
Yeah. So you're asking, what if we did this differently? What if there was no need for a seat? What if there was no need for even a human to be sitting on this thing? Now that's gonna spur technological innovations. At first, when you ask the what if, people are gonna look around and say, well, it's not possible right now. Well, you're not playing the short game. You're trying to play the long game. You're trying to get, innovation and the leadership position in your category. So that's going to require some investment. That's going to require totally different thinking. And sometimes in this case, with the lawnmower example, speed is not the primary goal if you're going to go smaller and have like an automated Roomba type experience, right? You want that thing to go fairly slowly, but make sure that it cuts all the grass evenly, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love these examples that you're giving, so please keep sharing them because I think it really helps land what we're trying to achieve. I think it's very good. I like to move on from it. If we know what an insight isn't,
Yeah.
i.e., it's not just an observation, not just a data point, not just a basic human truth. There's a part in your book. I think the acronym you created is insight. So if we
Yeah.
know what one isn't, to help us get to what one is, I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing your acronym to help people picture this in their mind about how they can start to create their own insight by using the acronym insight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to think of almost an insight as being almost like an action word, right? So what does an insight do for you? I think, even the word itself, insight, right? It's a noun. But maybe if we think of it in terms of this idea of what's it going to do for you. So first of all, the I in insight, it needs to inspire action. If you have something, if you're about to present at a meeting and you say, I've got an insight, let me share it with you. And you say, like I said, people are time poor, or, people need XYZ things. Okay, those are observations that anybody could say, I agree with you. But you're not going to have that moment of like, oh, wow, now we're going in a different direction. I am inspired by that.
Mm.
Or make you lean forward and ask, so why do you say that? Tell me a little bit more, right? So it's got to inspire action. It shouldn't be obvious. I've already mentioned that. Um, it's got to be very simple to explain, right? So it can't take hours and hours or a 50-page deck to make sense. You can include, and you should probably include some data, some observations, some trends to help explain or back up the insight that you're sharing. But that's not the same thing as just a data being an insight, right?
Mm.
It's got to connect back to your brand. If it doesn't, then we just say that's an interesting idea, but it's not really going to be an insight that inspires action to help your brand grow. So it's got to give your brand a clear advantage. That's the G in insight. Um, Again, the H, human truth. It doesn't, you know, it's got to be different than the standard. It's got to be something that's fresh and original, and it's got to be something that people can relate to. And then finally, the T, tapping into a cultural tension. And that's really the big one. If you can find the cultural tension in a situation, you're going to probably be getting much closer to an insight, because wherever that tension is, there's a lot of energy and a lot of emotion, and people will reveal a lot of things about their process, about the way they think and feel about things inside those cultural tensions.
So, do you have any examples of cultural tensions that you could help share to frame what that is? I guess that at its top level is showing that you understand your potential buyer, your leadership, your boardroom. You understand from their perspective potentially what their problems are.
Yeah, it's a great question. Cultural tensions. Everybody, I think, is probably at this point familiar with the Dove campaign for real beauty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And so where on one side of society you have people who are saying, "Hey, look, beauty is what's on the inside. That's what matters the most." And then you've got all of these people on the other side of society that basically are saying, "Nah, you gotta pluck and primp and do all kinds of things to look beautiful on the outside. So beauty is just skin deep, right?" So you've got these two opposing forces. Or mixed messages. Another way to think about cultural tensions is mixed messages.
Mm-hmm.
So Dove came in and they saw this, and they commissioned some research and studies, And they came out ultimately on the other side of it saying, we're going to come up with the campaign for real beauty. What does beauty really mean? And we're going to create the big tent over that cultural tension. And every conversation that people have, every argument or disagreement or agreement that people have, we want to be the ones to almost sponsor those conversations, right? Get people talking about it and build the big tent, as I like to say. So that's one example. But there are tons of cultural tensions in society right now. Inflation, you guys have that out there?
Oh, cripplingly so. Yeah.
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 So, so inflation causes attention. Obesity. There are lots of cultural tensions around the health and wellness space, right? So obesity, on the one hand, you've got all these 24-hour fitness type places and people, taking, I don't know if Ozempic is big out there, but you've got, all these different drugs or supplements that people can take to lose weight. And yet obesity is still, bigger than ever.
Rife. Yeah.
So that's a tension. So there's lots of different tensions in society. And if you can get in the center of that, or like I say, build a big tent around those tensions, you can get people talking. And that usually is where you start to reveal some aha moments because they're not going to give you the usual answers. They're going to be very emotionally revved up. And those emotions are what you're trying to get deeper on.
So just to dig a bit more on the cultural tensions, does it have to be macro issues or can it be industry specific?
It can be industry specific, but the more macro the tension is, the more you can tap into culture, right? So you can make your campaign sort of culturally contagious because people will be talking about that thing. Here in the States, there's a plant-based chicken called Alpha Foods or a plant-based meat company called Alpha Foods. And they came up with this campaign called Chickenflation, which was a very clever kind of pairing where they said, look, the price of chicken wings and the price of chicken just keeps going up and up because of inflation. Well, we don't even make chicken. We make fake chicken or plant-based chicken. So guess what? What we're going to do is every time the price of chicken goes up in the NASDAQ, okay, in the stock market, we are going to temporarily lower the price of our products. So we're going to have this inverse relationship, and we're going to call it, the whole campaign was called Chickenflation. Okay. And they just took over this one area where they kept showing in New York City and the NASDAQ area where that, sort of big billboard is always up and there's a ticker going. They took that over and they just kept showing that. And they had a whole street team out there handing out pamphlets and things like that. And it got a lot of coverage, a lot of media coverage because it was this kind of audacious thing to do. And, it took attention in the popular culture, and that gave them extra attention overall. So one of the nice things about tapping into cultural tensions is you get a lot of free PR media.
There's a great book that I read. You might be familiar with. Is it Jonah Berger? His book Contagious.
Yes. Yep.
Sort of explains the process about it. You've kind of just gone through some of the process there with that example, how things can go viral and get digital leverage, if you like, in a modern setting. It's a very good setting. And I guess in a more B2B environment, there are things that affect, things like supply chains. Terrible. They're awful at the moment for a lot of industries that we work with. Inflation is crippling. War seems to be crippling a lot of businesses. I guess those are positions where if you are bold enough as an organization, you could have a voice around that. And as you say, put a tent over it. And just to go into that a little bit more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, the idea of a tent is just like, if you go to an event, there's usually these tented areas that are usually sponsored by somebody. And you go in and you're having cocktails or food and you're milling about and you're talking about things. But if you, as the brand, create this kind of virtual tent around a topic, then every time somebody thinks about that topic, they're probably going to be thinking about you if you do the work well and you get attention with it. Um, so that's, with the Dove campaign for real beauty, that's a good example. So anytime, and the thing is, people are already having these conversations.
Mm.
People are having conversations in their living rooms, on social media, on a wide variety of topics. I'm not sure exactly. I would assume that some things in the UK are going to be similar. People are talking about immigration. People are talking about inflation. People, just think about where people are complaining or having debates or disagreements. And that if there's a debate, that means there's somebody on one side and there's somebody on the other side. And you said something earlier, which is you do have to be bold.
Mm.
Insight work is not for the meek or for people who are afraid to take decisive action. You are going to get perhaps some haters if you draw a line in the sand and you say, this is our campaign. But what we're trying to do is spark a conversation around this, or maybe not spark a conversation, because, like I said, the conversations are already happening. What you're trying to do is maybe inflame it or help people get to an interesting solution around it.
Mm. Yeah. Inflame conversations that are already. Oh, yeah. Everything these days. You say that there'll be opinions. Everyone's got an opinion about everything. You can't just have a normal conversation anymore, can you? You're either so far over here or so far over here, and it's even in the UK, it's becoming a bit messy, shall we say?
Well, let's take a positive example of it, because you're right. You can definitely get into like anger management issues around these things.
Very polite,
Um,
yes.
but so, do you guys have Domino's out there?
We
Domino's
do,
pizza?
we do.
Okay. So here's an example of reframing and leading to some work that is actually like beneficial to society. Okay. So you might say, well, what kind of business is Domino's, right? What is their business, Rob? What would you say?
It's a pizza delivery.
Yes, pizza delivery. Most people put the emphasis on the pizza part. Domino's would say it's all about the delivery.
Mm.
That's what we're focused on, is the delivery. So then if you're all about the delivery, you're going to look at the world in a slightly different way. And you're going to say, what is getting in the way of us delivering the pizzas on time? And there's this wonderful campaign they've done here in the States. I'm not sure if they've done it out there, but they started looking at potholes, because
Ah,
the delivery drivers go over these cracks in the pavement, and and then the pizza gets jostled and thrown upside down, and that can be a problem. So they said, you know what, we are going to pave over, basically we're going to be doing a community service. We are going to pave over all of these potholes or cracks in the street, and we are going to brand it. It's going to say paved by Domino's, right? But that is almost like a public works from a private company. That's a very interesting direction that you wouldn't get to if you just said, hey, we're a pizza company.
mm. Do you know what? I actually saw that the other day on Twitter, or X as it's called now. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it was in the UK. They'd
Right?
almost like stenciled the Domino's pizza over a repaired pothole.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
And so
so
then,
how then, Chris, did Insight get them to doing that campaign? If you
well,
reverse engineer that.
yeah, I mean, again, now one thing I will say, that not every campaign is going to have an insight. Okay.
Mm.
So you can take something and reframe it, and just a reframe truth can be powerful. Again, insights are big. They are complicated. They are the things that give us Netflix and Airbnb and Uber and all of these types of businesses. There's category disrupting insights, and then there's like brand insights, you could call it, or campaign insights, where you reframe the category internally. We'll talk about liquid death here in a second. If you guys are familiar with that out there, liquid death.
No, but I can't wait to find out.
Okay. So with Domino's Pizza in that situation, again, I think one of the things that they're always trying to figure out is, what can we do to, make delivery faster, better, more enjoyable? Because they did re-engineer their pizza. I mean, it was like 15 years ago, their pizza was compared to the cardboard box.
Yeah, and I think they came out and said, look, our pizzas were awful. We're
Yep.
getting better, and they acknowledged it, which I guess is big for a brand to do as well, right?
That is a big thing for a brand to do. And I think it's a very hard thing, because nobody wants to look at their faults. Nobody wants to say, you know what, you guys are right. We do make a pretty crappy product. That's not good PR. But in this age of like, be authentic, be honest, having that moment of honesty and saying, you know what, our pizza really isn't as good as it could be. And we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to make the best pizza we can possibly make. I think there are a lot of people out there who would say, I admire that. I appreciate that. You're not just trying to cover things up and trying to convince me that eating cardboard is actually tasty, you know? So I think they look at the delivery side of things. And I think to try to answer your question, I think one of the things that they probably do or did in this case with the campaign, the question, what's really going on here? What are we really all about? And digging deeper and deeper into that area, that's really important to get to a place of a different campaign springboard or a fundamentally different idea that could be approaching the level of an insight. So, you know, what's really going on here when people say, look, my pizza is stuck to the top of the box, you know, that's not what I ordered. Well, why is that happening? Well, because the drivers are smashing into potholes, right? And it's causing that to happen. Okay, if that's the case, how are we going to solve it? And some brands might say, well, that's not our job. We don't have pavement trucks. That's not our area of expertise or specialty. You say, okay, but what if we did that? What if we said this is part of our domain? If it affects delivery, it affects our business. Therefore, we're going to do something about it. And they have a secondary campaign beyond the paving about snow plows. So Domino's, you know, branded a whole bunch of snow plows in the Midwest in the United States, and they were just, you know, plowing snow out of the way so that drivers could get pizza delivered still fresh and hot, right? So it does require a boldness, and it begins with that question, why is this happening? What if we did something different? And what's really going on here in terms of the problem or the truth of the situation? And then being bold enough and having the budget and the R&D to say, yeah, we're going to brand a bunch of snowplows. But the payoff, we're going to get a lot of news coverage because this is a form of public work. And the news loves it. They love a good story.
It comes back to that being bold, doesn't it? Someone's got to make a decision to be slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, I guess, for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and with great risk comes great reward.
Yeah.
But it also comes with, you know, your head on the chopping block too if it doesn't work. That's
well,
the challenge.
potentially, yeah. I mean, what do you say to organizations that have this inertia? This, I know we can be different. I often use the phrase, everyone wants to be first, but no one wants to be first. It's like, how do you get over that in action with organizations?
That's a great question. I mean, sometimes it can be a change of leadership, you know, that can spark it. So, you know, at some point, if you're not getting the returns that you want, right? You're doing marketing and you're kind of getting the same old returns, then you do have to ask yourself, well, is this good enough for us? Or do we want to, you know, be bigger and to make these return on investments, you know, better? And if you want that, then you've got to say, well, what would do that? Is it just playing it safe? Is that going to get us where we need to go? Or do we have to do something bigger than that? So you're right. A lot of people say, I want something different. Then you bring them something different. They say, ooh, not that different. That's a little too different. But if it's backed by data, if it's backed by research and something you said earlier, just talking to people, it's amazing how many businesses don't actually talk to their customers. They have transactions with their customers. We talk to our customers. We send out email blasts every week or every month. That's not talking to your customers. That's a unilateral or unidirectional method of talking. You also need to listen, need to ask them questions. I often, you know, work with clients on what is it you're asking your customers about and how is that helping you? So, you know, a lot of times questions, would you recommend us to a friend or to another business? Okay, yes or no, that's going to be the answer. So what are you going to do?
Question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very binary question and it's kind of navel gazing. It sort of gives you an opportunity to pat yourself on the back and say, oh, they said yes, we must be doing great things. The best way, I think, to get to an insight or something that's going to help you change your business to get greater returns is looking at every part of your process, disassembling it and reassembling it and saying, at each one of these junctions, are we surprising and delighting or creating a wow moment for our customers? Or is it just kind of, yeah, that's fine, it works, right? You want people to talk about you. And to get them to talk about you, you've got to make something remarkable. I mean, the whole word remarkable, right, is a really powerful concept. So what are you doing in your business, in your communications, in your delivery of the services that you promise that make people say, I've got to tell somebody about this. Nobody does it like these guys.
And in certain industries, Chris, the bar uh, is so low, so low. Yeah, we
Mhm.
do, like I mentioned, quite a bit of work in the lubricant market, traditional manufacturing, engineering spaces, where all you see online is the years of experience, the
Mhm.
family legacy, the latest product brochure. It's all the same. And
Mhm.
it cannot take much for a business to be slightly different, but
Mhm.
to be hugely different in the eyes of the customer. It's not even
Mhm.
that big a decision because the bar is so low.
And a lot of times when you talk to customers, they will give you fodder for headlines. They will give you ideas that you can just run with. Now, again, you've got to be bold. You got to be willing to be, I guess the word is cheeky, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes, adding a little humor, adding a little innuendo or double entendre to your headlines, to your communications, to your personality. Brands with personality go a lot further. And I know we're talking a little bit about B2B, and I keep bringing it back to B2C, but I'm sure you're familiar with Yorkshire tea. Is that how you say it? Yorkshire or Yorkshire?
I'm right in Yorkshire, Chris. I know Yorkshire tea very well. Thank you.
All right. So Yorkshire tea, they have kind of had a resurgence over the past, several years by being more bold with their marketing, with their advertising. And again, some of this comes from they had a campaign for a good while around done proper, right? Or
Yes,
something like that.
that's right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And and so that was apparently, the it was a sign somewhere in the building, and somebody who was, I guess, a strategist or somebody outside of the realm of the business said, "Well, that's an interesting sign. Let's unpack that. What does that mean, done proper?" And then they just expanded it to all these other areas of life where they said, "What would we do? What if we said doing things this way? This is what blank looks like done proper." So they got it into the culture. And
Mm.
they had all of these wonderful examples in the campaign that just kept going. And you look forward to the next installment. Oh, how are they going to make government done proper? How are they going to make this done proper? How are they going to make that done proper? And that's also the secret to great campaigns is they're almost like television shows. You look forward to the next installment.
Mm. Yeah, and please don't make an apology from going back to B2C because I think B2B and B2C, well, B2B almost needs to get over itself and think it's not wholly different to B2C anymore. Buyers are engaging and buying in a wholly different way to what they used to in B2B. So I think there's so many lessons that can be learned from B2C into B2B behaviors. That example, I'm so glad you've used Yorkshire as an example. That makes me very happy. Um, the done proper thing, it could be a very similar thing in a manufacturing company. On
Mm-hmm.
time, in full, done proper.
Mm-hmm.
95% of deliveries on time, in proper. All the stuff that matter to the buyers, but with a bit of character. It's
Yeah.
not rocket science, but it's a decision, and I think that's the blocker um, that I'm seeing from this
Yeah.
conversation. Chris, I'm keeping an eye on your time, and I want to touch on what is one of the other buzzwords before we wrap up. AI. Where is AI taking the realm of branding, the realm of insights, the realm? Does AI help or hinder? And how do humans stay relevant in an insight-led world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, because the word insight has been so overused and misused and not clearly defined, if you go into ChatGPT or any AI program and you ask it for a definition of an insight, or you say, "Give me insights about blank category," it's going to give you all those things that we said were not insights. Okay. So it can't give you that because again, AI is based on whatever it's scraping
Yeah.
in the digital sphere in the first place. So that's the first issue. Um, the second thing is, I think what AI can do to be helpful is it can help you get the ball rolling. It's a great brainstorm partner, but you do have to know what questions to ask. So one of the things that I talk about in the book is find the contradiction, and this kind of ties back to find the cultural tension. So find the contradiction in situations where, people say one thing at one point, but then they say almost the exact opposite at another time. And you say, well, how can both of these things be true? Well, they're true at different times or they're true in different contexts, right? So, but you have to know what questions to ask. So you can ask AI, what are some of the category truths about this industry or that industry? Okay, great. And then you can say, now give me, let's say you ask for 10 category truths. All right, what are 10 things that are the opposite of that? Now write those in punchier language, right? Or how do you make fun of these category truths? That can be a really interesting technique. In fact, I'm talking with someone, Jeff Greenspan, the other day, who's a copywriter and a stand-up comedian, and we were talking about this project that he was part of during COVID called Brand Roasts. I just love this concept. So brand roasts is this idea that you give comedians access to your brand. That they're going to look over your materials, they're going to look at your value propositions, and then they're going to do what comedians do best, which is to roast it. They're going to make fun of your headlines, they're going to make fun of your value propositions. They're going to highlight essentially your weaknesses, your weak points. It's going to require a strong stomach on the part of the CEO. This is not meant for public consumption. This is all kind of like a workshop concept, right? But what that does is it makes you take a good, close look at yourself and say, you know what, you're right. This headline that we've been running for a while, it is kind of ridiculous. Or this picture that we've been using, this looks actually bad now that these comedians have made fun of it. We realize that now. So what can we do differently? Again, disassemble and reassemble. So I think asking AI to find out what's funny or go ahead and make fun of these headlines that we're currently using, that can be an interesting technique. But the thing is, you still, at this point in time, you have to know how to articulate the insight to inspire action.
Mm.
So you can use AI the way people use the moving walkway at an airport. It can get you somewhere 70% faster, right? But you have to, there are still some things that you have to do.
You still have to know which terminal you want to get to.
You do. That's a great point. You have to know where you're actually trying to go. And I think most people, they don't exactly know kind of what their goals are or what they're trying to change. I mean, usually they say, oh, we're just trying to increase sales. We need more brand awareness and we want to increase sales. Okay, that's table stakes for running a business, right? What are you trying to do specifically and how are you going to get there? That's the part that's important. And I think building the story to get to the insight. You don't go into a room and say, guys, I have an insight. Here it is, right? You have to lead up to it. It's just like watching a murder mystery or a movie, right? I think I say this in the book, a joke. The shortest setup for a joke is knock knock, right? If you don't do the knock knock part and you just give the punchline, people have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So there is a process of selling an insight,
Yeah.
and those opening things that you say to kind of get a story rolling and get people to think differently is really important. Make it less abstract. One of my colleagues, Joanne Ciarino, she was talking to me about something we did at BBDO for pet food, and there was some research done on dogs and cats and how owners relate to dogs and cats. And this kind of led to this insight of cats, not dogs, are man's best friend. And that statement is provocative, right? It makes you lean in and say, why do you say that? What makes you say that? And you say, well, based on our research, we talked to all these different people, and they said when they talk to their dogs, they talk to them like they're 3 years old. A lot of baby talk language. When people talk to their cats, it's like they're talking to an equal. An interesting observation, right? An interesting observation that then has to go through an articulation process that says cats, not dogs, are man's best friend. That's counterintuitive. And then that is a springboard for all kinds of new work.
And that's not something that AI could have created. And I think there's such a. Do you think it could? Could AI have done that?
Give it time. I mean, Will Smith eating spaghetti 1 year ago was a horror film, and now
Oh,
Will
yeah.
Smith eating spaghetti is getting quite good. So, give it some more time, maybe in a year, or maybe faster. But again, you still have to know what to ask it.
Yes, exactly. It's only as good as the output is only as good as the input of the prompts, isn't it? And I think there's almost a race to work yourself out of a job by saying AI will do it, and we're absolving so much responsibility. And, I use chat very often, but I'll use chat from this conversation, but it's only based on a conversation that's actually happened. So therefore, the responsibility is mine to make sure the output is good. I want it to
Yeah.
help me, not replace me. And I think sometimes there's the forgetting of that because AI can do it for me.
You still have to use your imagination. So building an insight, and I like to say building an insight because I think that it is an active process. It's not a passive process. I don't know that you find an insight, right? Because if you could find it, everybody could find it. And that's the problem with data points or with observation is, oh, I found it. Well, then it's just a race to see who can uncover it or find it first under this rock or that rock. But building an insight gives you a much bigger strategic advantage because you are connecting 5, 6, 7 dots, right? This data point plus this observation plus this human truth plus this other thing that you notice, this customer pain point. You're bringing all those together and you're creating a structure that is quite unique. Now, at some point, there's always going to be a number 2 in the category. Uber figured some things out and Lyft is there, right? VRBO and Airbnb. There's always going to be a number 1 and number 2 who are kind of running on the same initial insight, if you will, category disrupting insight. But from there, you have to keep innovating. And you may find some things that lead to campaign insights. You may lead to other new innovations based on that. But you still have to build it. And that requires imagination. That requires talking to people. And that requires connecting the dots in a way that's unique to you, your life, your experiences, your dreams. All of those things are going to be unique to you. And there's no wrong way to connect the dots. There's only what you can sell in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we head to the final point I want to touch on, Chris, is let's take everything we've heard and discussed and try where possible. And I know silver bullets and quick wins don't necessarily exist, but it's a podcast, so we need some quick wins. For a sales professional, for a leader, for a business owner, for an organization, marketing pro, listening to this now thinking, oh, do you know what? My whole perspective of insights has changed. What might people be able to do differently from today, having listened to the past 45 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is don't accept surface level answers, right? Don't just accept on the surface. If someone says, why do people do this? Oh, here's the reason why. Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's the reason. Let's go with that. Ask, do they ever not do that? Are there situations, people say, why do people eat out at fast food places? It's cheap. They're lazy. They don't want to cook. There's this, there's a lot of like usual suspect answers. And if you talk to people, first of all, they may give you some moments that you're like, huh, I've never thought of that before. Never heard of that. Or not just eating at fast food. Why do people do delivery now? Because they're lazy. Maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe they have, they're taking care of an elderly person at their house. I mean, again, that may not be the mass market, but what it does is it opens you up to the possibility, which is hard for our egos. You don't know everything, right? So don't accept the surface level answers. Keep asking why. Try to always go 5 layers deep. When someone gives you an answer, gently poke at that and say, well, why do you think that's happening? Or what if we did it this way, a little bit differently? And again, you've got to do it diplomatically and gently because people are going to feel challenged, right? But if you don't ask challenging questions, there's that Einstein quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but if you keep asking the same questions, you'll just get the same answers. So you've got to ask different questions. And they're going to have to be challenging. So if I mean, one of the big danger signs of any organization, if they say, this is the way we've always done it. Okay, well, you can keep doing it that exact same way as the world changes around you. But guess what? In the competition, somebody's going to try to start to do things differently. And if they succeed, they will steal your market share. So you have a choice. You can be complacent and just say, this is the way we've always done things. Or you can be on the front lines of innovation and ask challenging questions as an organizational cultural thing, right? Everybody should be able to push each other politely and respectfully in an effort to get to a more innovative, disruptive answer.
Brilliant. And I think the quote from Einstein is, isn't it his definition of insanity is doing the same things but expecting different results?
Yes,
There
that
we go.
is.
We recovered it, Chris. So yeah, listen, Chris, how can we connect with you, see more about your work? Because I think for those listening, watching, will want to know more about this because it's such a fascinating topic and discussion that we've rammed into 45 minutes. So it'd be great to find out where we can know more about your work, see what you do. Where can we get you?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you mentioned the book, Any Insights Yet? That's a great primer, great place to start. You can read it in under 2 hours. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's an easy place. I also have chriskocek.com, KOCEK.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter, which is every week I put out the light bulb newsletter because that's that aha moment. And there's in every light bulb newsletter, there's just 3 things, but they're guaranteed to help you think differently and find some inspiration. One is you'll get a piece of creative that I've seen in the world that I say, I wish I'd come up with that. The questions that it sparked in me, and then a quote that has made me a smarter or better strategist. So one of those 3 things is bound to make you think a little bit differently and get you inspired. So the light bulb newsletter is a great way to connect. And then, if you ever want to do a workshop with your brand, I do, 2-hour, half day, full day type workshops. Willing to travel. My mom's from England, so.
Whereabouts in England?
She grew up right outside the what is it? Is it called the Hurlingham Country Club? Lawn and tennis, Wimbledon.
Oh, Wimbledon. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
She grew up right outside there, right after World War II. Grew up there and had all kinds of adventures. She said she would sneak in to the All England Lawn and Tennis Club back in the day from time to time, but I guess they put up stronger fences since then.
Yeah, I'll go and tell on your mom now.
There's no evidence back then, so
yeah.
no cameras or anything. But
absolutely, Chris, thank you for taking time out of your earlier morning than I realised it was with daylight saving. I appreciate you taking time out to be with us today. I hope the rest of your day is good, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Great conversation.
Cheers, Chris.